and more particularly in the occupant of the White House. Early in our history, John Adams wrote his once again friend Thomas Jefferson about the dangerous and corrupting powers of human deception. Power always thinks it has a great soul and vast views beyond the comprehension of the weak, and that it is doing God's service when it is violating all of God's laws. Adams' letter is cited in Reinhold Niebuhr's book, The Irony of American History, written in 1952 to address the conflict between communism and democracy. Niebuhr was a profound public theologian who disdained the naive optimism of theological liberalism as well as the privatized piety of those whose religion actually masked the narrow parochialism of conventional American smugness. He called for an active and realistic engagement in the world, far beyond his years formerly as a pacifist, but an engagement tempered by a healthy regard for original sin and its expression in pride and vanity, both personal and corporate. Written in the years following the triumphs of World War II, Niebuhr's book challenged the dangers of unrestrained American idealism. To read it today, amid the new American messianic zeal and religious certainty of our current war on terror, is to be haunted by lessons not learned from John Adams. Not surprisingly, the president to whom Niebuhr returns at the end of his book is Abraham Lincoln. And he quotes from his second inaugural address. It's worth hearing a piece of that again in our current context. Neither party expected for the war the magnitude or the duration which it has already attained. Neither side anticipated that the cause of the conflict might cease with or even before the conflict itself should cease. Each looked for an easier triumph and a result less fundamental and astounding. Both sides read the same Bible and pray to the same God, and each evokes his aid against the other. It may seem strange that any men should dare to ask a just God's assistance in wringing their bread from the sweat of other men's faces, but let us judge not that we be not judged. The prayers of both could not be answered. That of neither has been answered fully. The Almighty has his own purposes. Fondly do we hope, fervently do we pray that this mighty scourge of war may speedily pass away. Yet, if God wills that it continue until all the wealth piled by the bondsman's 250 years of unrequited toil shall be sunk, and until every drop of blood drawn with the lash shall be paid by another drawn with the sword, as we said 3,000 years ago, so still it must be said, the judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. Lincoln's piety and his politics saw beyond narrow partisan interest to an arc of providence that both encompasses and motivates our actions, and at the same time limits the seductive dangers of our own pretensions. Historian Alan Gelzo of Gettysburg College leaves us with an agnostic Lincoln in his book, Redeemer President. Agnostic in the sense that Lincoln was not able to claim with certainty a personal relationship to a divine father in the more classic evangelical mode. We're a long way from our current president, who seems to have seen God face to face and who hears God with some regularity. No, Lincoln's is a different kind of piety, steeped, says Gelzo, in faith in divine superintendency. A confrontation with the Calvinist God who could not be captured or domesticated, who possessed a conscious will to intervene, challenge, and reshape human destinies without regard for historical processes. Gelzo suggests, echoing Niebuhrian terms, that it was this tension between his Calvinistic melancholy and his bourgeois aggressiveness which acted as the best mutual restraint. His confidence in the direction of Providence kept his determinism from collapsing into helplessness in the darkest hours of the war. And it was his determinism that prevented his optimism from soaring into arrogance in victory. One wonders where we might be today had such a piety and rhetoric guided our nation through the 7 years since September 11th, 2001. Could we hope for a presidential piety and for forms of religious engagement in public life that move beyond secular disdain on the one hand and partisan certainty on the other? A piety rooted not in utter assurance and arrogance, but in a confident faith tempered by doubt and humility in the face of our own human capacities? And could we dare hope for a political process where such a piety might actually be honored and valued, rather than swept away before parochial moral litmus tests, or lost in the foolishness of backing candidates solely on the basis of whether he or she believes Jesus is the only way to salvation? Reinhold Niebuhr didn't use the term piety in his book, but it is surely to a public and personal piety that he refers as he draws his book on democracy's struggle with communism and his reflection on Lincoln to a close. There is, he said, even in a conflict with a foe with whom we have little in common, the possibility and necessity of living in a dimension of meaning in which the urgencies of the struggles are subordinated to a sense of awe before the vastness of the historical drama in which we are jointly involved, to a sense of modesty about the virtue, wisdom, and power available to us for the resolution of its perplexities, to a sense of contrition about the common human frailties and foibles which lie at the foundation both of the enemy's demonry and of our own vanity, and to a sense of gratitude for the divine mercies which are promised to those who humble themselves. American voters, it seems, are easily seduced by optimistic and self-righteous interpretations of their own history, by messianic convictions about their current circumstances, and by the notion that their public life, their commonwealth, can easily be reduced to diminished virtues of either blue or red. The road to the White House has not often been paved with theological subtlety or by a piety marked by modesty in the face of the historical drama in which we are all involved. In recent years in particular, God has been enlisted in the partisan fray with an ideological certainty that makes a mockery of the awe toward which Reinhold Niebuhr beckons us. But it is worth remembering, both in gratitude and in hope, that at the most perilous moment in our nation's history, we were guided by a president more trusting in the mystery and the majesty of God's providence than in the platitudes and certainties of his own faith. A providence in which both blue and gray were both inextricably linked, and whose trajectory cannot and must not ever be easily conformed to our own crusade, no matter how grand or how noble it might appear to be. Thank you.
Today at the City Club of Cleveland, we are listening to Reverend John Thomas, General Minister and President of the United Church of Christ. We will return to our speaker in just a minute for our traditional City Club questions. We encourage you to formulate questions for our speaker now and remind you that your questions should be brief and to the point. We welcome all of you here and those listening to WCPN 90.3 FM, WCLV, WTAM, or one of the many radio stations across the country. Radio broadcasts of the City Club are made possible through the generous support of Case Western Reserve University. Our television broadcast partners are WVIZ, PBS IdeaStream, and Time Warner Cable. Television broadcasts are supported by National City and Cleveland State University.